All right, so today we are going to be completing our read of The Whistle by Anna Stevis. So we are going to be talking about reading, summarizing, and analyzing, and then you guys will be responding to comprehension questions on your LTS11 L13 The Whistle Comprehension. Our vocab terms this week are bleating, which is the weak crying of a sheep or goat, savory, food that is salty or spicy rather than sweet, paternal, which is inherited from father's side of the family, and infuriated, which is extremely angry. So we are going to be finishing reading. As we approached the storage shed, I could see that the outside latch hook on the door was in place. I flipped the hook up and flung open the door. There, sitting on the floor, wrapped in burlap bags like a mummy, was a cold and shivering grandmother. She tried to talk, but her voice was almost gone. My brother helped the tiny woman to her feet, and Kino carried her into the house as quickly as he could. All the way she was croaking like a frog, but I'm sure I discerned the words, "Huercos desgraciados," repeated over and over. This meant that we were wretched brats, or maybe worse. My brothers placed her in the chair nearest the kitchen stove while I fetched a woolen blanket to wrap her in. She poured a cup of coffee and set it before her. Then we all sat down around the table, staring at our obviously infuriated grandmother. "What unfortunate children you are. You have no brains," she said in a raspy voice. Her entire body was shivering. "You left me to die out there." She shook her fists at each one of us and then looked squarely at me. "You Telesphora, you must be deaf." She shook a crooked index finger at me. I knew she was very angry with me because she used my real name. So what happened to Abuela and how? Is that she got locked in the shed, probably from the winds blowing. And why did Chatita say she knew it was bad when Abuela used her full name? Well, we usually think of somebody using our full name or our first and our middle name, or first, last, our first, middle, and last as they're being serious. And they want us to know that what has happened is completely serious. "I called and called for you. The wind blew, the door shut and it locked. All afternoon I yelled, but you didn't come. I nearly froze to death." She scowled and slowly turned her head away from me. "But I didn't hear you," I answered. "I'm sorry. Please, Abuelita, I'm truly sorry." How could I have confused my grandmother's voice with that of a bleeding goat? I felt terribly guilty and ashamed. I knew that the shed door was prone to latch by itself if it was slammed. That's why a wooden stake for propping the door open was usually kept nearby. This time the stake had not been used, and now my grandmother was shaking, shivering, and glaring at me. So she was infuriated because she'd been screaming for her all day. And Chatita feels guilty and ashamed because she truly thought that it was a goat making the noise and not her poor grandmother. "Just you wait, Telesphora. You have until your father gets home, and I'll have him punish you," she said, and then her bottom lip quivered, her nostrils flared. My parents came home in a few days, and of course, the first thing that occurred was that Abuelita told her story to my father. "Son, Telesphora left me locked in the storage shed all afternoon on Saturday. I called and called for her, but she declares she didn't hear me. She says she heard a goat bleating." Can you imagine? What could I possibly sound like a goat? My grandmother said. My father was very concerned, of course. I admitted to him that indeed I had mistakenly thought I heard a goat, and that I was terribly sorry that I hadn't checked on Abuelita as I should have. He scolded me severely, but this wasn't enough punishment, according to my grandmother. So she decided to penalize me herself by refusing to speak to me. This made me very sad. It seemed to affect all of us. A sense of sorrow and discomfort permeated our family. So you should think if you agree with Abuelita's reaction and treatment of Chatita. So do you agree that she should have given her that silent treatment? 2 weeks later, I asked to go with my father to the big yellow store in town while Papa made his purchases. I bought a silver whistle and a long piece of blue satin ribbon. I threaded the ribbon through the ring on the whistle and tied the ends of the ribbon together. That evening, I placed the whistle in a little box and wrapped it in some colored paper. After supper, I approached my grandmother. "This is for you, Abuelita. I'm terribly sorry about what happened to you in the shed. I hope you can forgive me." My grandmother looked at me and said nothing. Then she took the box and opened it. She pulled the whistle out by its ribbon. Well, Telesphora, whatever is this for? She asked, keeping her eyes on the whistle. It's to wear around your neck when you're outside. If you need me, just blow the whistle and I'll come to you, I said. So Chatita was trying to make an apology, right? She was trying to show that she was sorry and that she was always going to be there for her abuelita. The next evening, while I was feeding the chickens, I heard the faint whistle. I heard a faint whistle. I stopped what I was doing and stood very still. Then I heard the whistle more distinctly. Yes, it was definitely coming from inside the storage shed. I rushed to the shed and found the door latched. That surprised me because the wind wasn't blowing at all. There was no way that that door could have slammed shut by itself. Something seemed really strange about this, and I was suspicious. I unlatched the door and opened it. There stood my grandmother with the whistle in her mouth. She quickly removed it and said, I think your papa needs to do something about that crazy door latch. Don't you think so, Chatita? She hurried out of the shed and we started toward the house. I could see that she was smiling, and I think I even heard her chuckling. So, do we think that the winds blew the shed shut the second time? Probably not. She shut it, I believe, herself to test if Chatita was being serious or not about caring about what happened to her. And you are to think about what if it's a deeper meaning of the gift of the whistle and explain that with evidence from the text. So, today you're going to be responding to your comprehension questions on your lesson activity. LTS 11, LTS 11 L13, the whistle comprehension are your questions to complete for today.